Thank you guys for tuning in. Ben Wright here from the Henhouse Prowlers and our nonprofit Bluegrass Ambassadors. Uh, Today we're working with one of the finest guitar players in the world, and I'm really excited about it. Before we get started, I want to remind folks that we're doing two of these a week. Wednesdays is just for all music lovers, and Thursdays is pretty much kids only. I know this guy has some really exciting stuff lined up for that as well. Please help us get the word out about these things. We're doing this for free to kind of keep ourselves occupied during this interesting times we're living in, and want to get the word out as much as possible. We are paying the artists. Fareed very graciously is donating his fee to the COVID-19 relief fund, but we really want to be donating or paying artists for this. And the only way we can do that is through donations to our nonprofit, bluegrassambassadors.org, paypal.me/bluegrassambassadors, or you can go to our Patreon. Just last night, I uploaded the videos from last week's session with Rick Ferris from the Special Consensus, which was a fantastic couple of episodes and a really great way to get started. That's on our patreon.com/bluegrassambassadors. $5 a month gets you access to back episodes and more. If you can't help with donations, that's totally fine. But you could share this, like sharing this video as we're doing this and afterwards helps get the word out and helps get this in front of as many people as possible. So thank you guys so much. Please let me introduce you to somebody I'm proud to consider at least moderately a friend. We've done stuff in the past together. He's been so helpful to us. He's one of the best guitar players I've ever met. Stretches across all sorts of genres and boundaries. Welcome, Fareed Haque.
Hi, everybody. I'm new to Zoom, so
Aren't we all?
I think I'm supposed to run around real fast now.
Yeah, that's right.
No,
That's right.
I feel like I'm going all the way to an outer space satellite and back. Less than, I mean, there. See?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So that we already have some responses coming into the chat, applauding you. So that's great. Folks, please drop questions you may have in the chat, and we'll get to them, as many of them as we possibly can. Fareed, tell me a little bit about yourself as a guitar player and as a professional musician.
Well, I've been a Chicago native forever. Born in the area and raised in the area. My mother from South America, my dad from India.
Hmm.
I always had this kind of combination of American experience mixed in with broader world experience, and I think that's reflected in sort of everything that I do. I play lots of different styles of music, make albums and tour a fair amount. As a leader and as a sideman. And I've also, recently retired from 30 years as a professor at Northern Illinois University. I've also been involved in educating, though as much as I do enjoy the teaching, I think I've been more visible as a performer than as a teacher. I do a lot of educational stuff, but I'm working so much on the road that a little hard to be as focused as on simply education. I do a series of courses for TrueFire. That's really helped me focus the educational side of what I do. And then, of course, playing and writing music and working on different projects is sort of my passion.
That's yeah. Would you say you struck a balance between performing and teaching when you were at Northern Illinois University?
No.
Oh.
Oh my God. You see these here? I used to have black hair. So for the past literally 30 years, what I would do was teach Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, get on a bus or a plane on Thursday or Wednesday night, depending on the flight schedule, go to wherever I got a tour, miss a week of school, so do 11 days. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, fly home, teach again Monday.
Hmm.
3 days. So I managed to get in about 200 dates a year for the past 30 years while having a full-time job, and I do not recommend that. But it's been a wild ride, and I have to say, much as I might complain a little bit, teaching is wonderful if you're doing it in conjunction with playing a lot. You're only teaching becomes problematic because you kind of get isolated from you naturally. After, imagine if you're teaching for 30 years, after a while it's really only about what's in your head and what's in your students, and you start to become very blindsided. But if you're gigging a lot and then teaching, there's a whole lot of perspective that goes back and forth. And I would say I learn more teaching because it forces me to be disciplined about how I work. And I've improved so much as a player through teaching. And I've improved as a teacher through playing, because one of the things that my students appreciate about what I'm able to say is, hey, I know this is what it says in the book, but out in the real world, that's not how that's going to go.
Yeah.
And that really changes the discussion for a lot of students. I'm not good at teaching not serious students. I'm not really kind of a teacher. I'm more of a player, gigging guy who's sounding for students.
Huh. That's fascinating. I can associate with some of that. I mean, I definitely think you bring more value to a school if you're a performing teacher. Like they definitely, you're giving that perspective to students, and that's really cool.
It can be great tension between faculty members,
Yeah, yeah, right.
want to right or wrong. It's just, the nature of a university is, without getting too far into this subject, the nature of the university is to remove the artistic values from the marketplace so that they're more pure, idealized, and I think there's value to that.
Yeah.
You want to be able to say, and I do this here. I mean, I got my music stand right here, with all kinds of music that I'm pretty sure nobody except me wants to hear.
Yeah.
And so I spend a lot of time with that, and with a lot of music that is passionate and interesting to me initially, and not just viable in the commercial workplace. So there's value.
Fareed, do you want to play a little bit of something for us before we continue this discussion?
Sure. Which guitar should I get? Let me get my jazz guitar.
Folks, while he's getting his guitar, I see people raising hands in Zoom here. Just drop your questions in the chat, and I will get to them as I'm able to. I saw specifically a good friend of ours, Assad, is on here from Pakistan, who's an amazing guitar player from Pakistan.
Very
So let's make sure those questions get in here in the chat.
Love to meet Assad. That sounds like a good connection.
Oh yeah, he played with like the most famous Pakistani rock band in the world for a while, and we met him at the airport in Karachi and ended up having this beautiful connection with him and jamming with him. I'll connect you two for sure.
Very cool. Okay, all systems are almost go.
If you're just tuning in, this is guitar master Fareed Haque showing off some of his wares. I'm thrilled to be here and doing this. This is awesome.
It's all set up. There we go.
That's how it goes. This ain't a stage. There's no crew.
See, I got my little setup here because I used to be set up in the basement. I used to be set up in the basement here at the house, but with all of this craziness, we tried to set up the basement for the kids so they can run around and make a mess. And so we moved all my stuff up here to the room with light and plants, and it's been really lovely. I have my
Yeah.
little here and all my guitars. I'll turn this around here for a second. You can see. Can you see that?
Yeah.
There. Oh, it's like a little heaven. I got that little cabinet with my records over there, and in that cabinet is like strings and picks and just doodads, and I can just fiddle. I can just, well, it's not really fiddling, it's more kerplunking, but
What are you playing there? What is that?
this is a custom built, all of my electric guitars are custom built, all my jazz guitars are custom built by Brian Gallup out of Michigan. He's a fantastic luthier.
Hmm.
And this is the second prototype, and I think those of you from Pakistan will be able to read this. It's Farid and Arabic script.
Oh, cool.
So we kind of did it that way so that it wasn't kind of overt, you know. With I wasn't super into the personalized guitar, but and what's interesting about this instrument, I just love this guitar. I mean, this is just an incredible piece of craftsmanship and technology. Again, it is a prototype. The final one is slated. We've been waiting for a year or so, but things are busy, right?
Yeah.
So maple back and sides. Let me show you that. So such prettiness there.
Ooh.
And a spruce top. But what's interesting, you know, most jazz guitars will feed back at high volumes. They'll hum and squeal because the acoustics in them, as I'm sure many of you know, will interface with the amps and create all kinds of problems. This, if you notice, has no F holes. So even though it's a full hollow jazz guitar, there's no F holes. And in between the bridge and the back, there's a little post that connects the back to the top, and the top and the back are tuned to resonate in harmony. In addition, the back is flat. So small block under the bridge, no F holes, flat back and arched top. Three subtle but really significant things. You get a great tone. But what you notice is that most jazz guitars that are full depth like this, and the new one is going to be even bigger, 17 inches, you can't do this on most jazz guitars. You hear the sustain? I don't know what you can hear through the phone there.
Yeah.
Just like bells, right? So you have this incredible sustain.
Wow.
And all the punch.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You can play some blues on here. And
Say that again?
You can play some blues on here.
Yeah.
And really stretch. But also, if I wanted to play, say for example, I have this project where I'm playing music by Franz Caseus, who's a Haitian classical guitarist and composer. and I'm playing. We just recorded the new album for Delmark Records. Features the full band playing all these classical Haitian guitar pieces. I think there's a beautiful video of our debut performance at Millennium Park with the full band. And I'm playing this guitar. And what's interesting is you just heard me play some pretty kind of old school swinging jazz, you know. And I can also play.
Wow, that was kind of mesmerizing.
That,
Geez.
I'm telling you, this guy, Francis Casey, is an unsung genius. His music is so beautiful. And, you know, my kids, I've got a pile of them here over here. They're in the other room, struggling to keep their mouths shut. Um, and they hear me all the time. They're like, yeah, oh God, there's that guitar again, you know. And Dad, can you stop? I'm trying to talk. I'm on, well, you know, fork knife, Dad. And then I start playing this piece, and all of a sudden, all the kids come around, and they're just like uh, lying on the couch and just checking it out. It's like, and this is actually some kind of traditional, and I don't want to claim to be an expert on it, but a traditional Haitian Santeria kind of rhythm.
Hmm.
And this piece is called the Dance of the Hoonsies, which is a rough translation, Dance of the Voodoo Priestesses. So there is some kind of a you know, connection to the African tribal roots from Haiti. And there's some mystical feeling in this music. It's just incredible. So I'm excited.
So when does that is that an album you're making?
Yeah, we're in the middle of it. The tracks are done. We're just ready to start mixing.
Okay.
So actually, it's a pretty creative time for me because we have a new record with my Indian Flat Earth Ensemble, which is more Hindustani inspired soul jazz, and then this Haitian project with the same band but with a slightly different setup of percussionists instead of Indian percussion, Afro-Caribbean percussion.
I actually have a question here from a good friend of ours named Vijit, who is in Dubai, but he's from India, and he's another person I actually want to have as a guest. Really fabulous singer and songwriter. And he says, I heard influences of Hindustani classical music while you were warming up. How big of an influence is that in your music?
It's a pretty big influence. I think it's important to make a very clear distinction, and I say this hopefully not to offend anybody, but there's a huge disconnect between the Indian and Pakistani classical music traditions and the folk music traditions. And not unlike in the West, where it's not uncommon for classical musicians to be able to read and do a lot of formal musical activities, but not necessarily play by ear or jam or improvise. The analogy isn't perfect because obviously Indian classical musicians do improvise, but they improvise within very narrow parameters, and they tend to disrespect, this is a generalization, not all, but most, tend to disrespect the folkloric roots of Hindustani music, particularly Punjabi music, Bhangra, all this kind of music. And what I've been struggling with for the years, and I'm finally getting through to it, is playing music that is inspired by the music that I love. Not that I don't love Indian classical music, but after a while I'm yawning, and I like the groove. I love that music that I grew up with, and I wrote all these tunes with that kind of feel. And I can't tell you the 10 or 15 year battle it's been to get musicians to, like Indian musicians particularly, to actually play a pocket. And they're out there. There's tons of them out there, but they're not the classical guys. So you're like, you start going through all this formal classical stuff, Indian classical stuff, and they're like, huh? And then you're like, oh, just play a pocket. And they're like, oh, you mean like this? But it's like anything. It's like, if you had a drummer coming in to play a funk recording session and a percussionist to come in and the bass player and the guitar player, I mean, there's principles there, right? The kick drum sounds like this, the snare sounds like that. There's a part here, there's a part there. Then there's this overdub that you're going to do on the other percussion. There's going to be one electric guitar going, going, And there's another one going. There's a whole architecture of this music, right, that we call funk. This, maybe. The same is true of a lot of this Hindustani folk music. I mean, the percussionists come in, but I finally found some real cats who can play this music around here. Man, it's like, oh no, you have to do this, then you got to put one of those on. I'm like, yeah, I know, I've been thinking about that, and I told the classical guys, they're like, huh? I don't, and I'm just like, no. And so it's so gratifying to meet up with these musicians who are understanding some of these groove traditions that are such an important part of the music that I love and the music that I'm writing. So yes, I'm influenced by Hindustani music, but not really Hindustani classical music, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's really, you just kind of blew my mind open. I understood about 2/3 of what you were saying, but it was fascinating. I hope that addressed Vijit's question. I suspect it did. Vijit is the guy who asked that question. I think sees the world similarly to the way you do. He respects and plays a lot of Western music, but also has some roots in Hindustani stuff, and they cross. And he's another guy I should introduce you to. So I'm gonna ask you another question. That I'd love it if you'd play that weird guitar you started on this. So Jake, our mandolin player, asked a great question. He said, I'd love to hear what the last record you were listening to.
The last record, I mean, recording.
Yeah.
Um, I was listening to a bunch of soul jazz recordings. I'm mixing some tracks because I have a little bit of spare time, and I wanted to A/B. Um, so I was listening to Horace Silver. I was listening to Horace Silver's song for my father, and then Kenny Burrell, Chitlins con Carne. You have to say Chitlins con Carne, not Chitlins con Carne. That's not right. Chitlins con Carne. Um, and uh, and then I was listening to a little bit of Desperado, Pat Martino,
Mm.
and I got a couple of questions that popped up over here about my favorite jazz guitarists and my favorite records.
Yeah.
Um,
People want to know.
um, so my biggest influences, I think, are clearly Pat Martino on one hand, Grant Green in the middle, and John McLaughlin on the other side, in terms of jazz.
Mm.
So while I really appreciate John and a lot of the fusion guitarists, my sense is that they've been so involved in composing and innovating that they've let some of those roots go a little bit. And I've always been a guitarist who embraces roots, whether it's Chicago roots or South American roots or Indian roots. You know, I want to have roots. Um, and maybe that's part of the Chicago experience, you know,
Yeah,
Chicago.
absolutely.
So you go, you can't help it. You know, you learn how to play the blues in a way that I'm always amazed. Like, I wouldn't consider myself like, you know, incredible blues player, but there's some basics about the blues that you learn from being in Chicago that I'm amazed how many people around the country, great musicians, don't really have that connection. It's a Midwestern thing, maybe, and a New Orleans thing. You know, the Mississippi corridor there.
I mean, I think that's really that really resonates with me. Like, I'm lucky enough to travel around the world as a musician, and so many people ask us as a band, like, how did you get into bluegrass in Chicago? And it's like, man, there is a respect for every genre of music in this city. And you if you love it, you're going to find it, or if you don't love it, you're going to, because you'll run into it, you know.
Right. Chicago is a really powerful musical force, and I'm excited that the city of Chicago is embracing that with their year of music.
That's
We'll see
right.
how it plays out given the crisis, but
Yeah.
I've been appointed co-director along with Juanis Zarur of the Chicago Immigrant Orchestra,
Hmm.
and we'll be doing a series of performances featuring 18 to 20 um, musicians living in Chicago from the Chicago area who have, you know, various ethnic and cultural backgrounds. So musicians from Asia, India, Arab countries, Europe, the British Isles, South America, Africa, all over, and putting that together. And we're writing some music and arranging some stuff. It's going to be a very cool project, but it sort of is a culmination in many ways of my Chicago experience, and how Chicago has allowed me to embrace who I am and still manage to make a living.
I want to know more about that project. Just so you folks know, we'll be sharing video of this and uh, these entire videos, but also all the stuff that Fareed's talking about. I'm going to link to it on our Patreon, and I'll do it in the event for today's show as well. I really want myself to learn more about these things. So, Fareed, are you going to grab that other weird guitar? It looks like he is.
I'm doing something.
There's some really great questions here. Keep asking them, folks, either in the Q&A section or in the comments. I see Aaron Dorfman's here. our
And
former our former guitar player, your former student, he says that you whooped his butt in school into being a good guitar player. He says you really helped him out.
we had a great time.
Yeah.
Um, so many great memories of my time at NIU, especially when the state of Illinois had money. It was incredible to actually have a budget and to be able to do things. We did some wonderful things.
Mm.
Larry Coryell came to the school. Pat Martino came to the school. Thanks to Aaron in many ways. He is a
Mm.
mover and maker, so appreciate you, buddy. So this is built by Kim Schwartz, who originally was from Chicago, and let me see if I can get this here. There's his. He's a very respected yoga instructor and guitar builder, and he's built a few of these for me. And this one is war torn, as you can see, but it just sounds fantastic. It's been through a lot of um, iterations. Had to rebrace it, so a friend of mine put a panel in here so we get in and reinforce it. But it really has the sound. I call it a gistar. A sitar or a sarod in India have a certain buzz, but those instruments primarily are melodic instruments. You can't do a lot of chords on an instrument like that, and you can't really play chromatically. I mean, there are some instruments that have been made, also hybrids, so you can play chromatically. That means the whole scale, right? Normally, you would move the frets on a sitar to find the raga that you're in and only use those notes. Obviously, in jazz, you need access to all 12 keys and all 12 notes. And so to be able to play jazz with a sound that's not trying to copy, but, you know, reminiscent of the Hindustani tones and timbres, Kim designed this instrument. Really, it's kind of amazing. I just said, hey, we should do something like this. This would be cool. And I went away on tour and I came back and he's like, hey, you should come by. He's like, what do you think of this? And I was like, oh, man, this is crazy.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It is. And, you know, if I had money, I would get him to build me 3 more because we've come a long way. But, you know, it's a lot of bread to lay down for something like this. And it's totally worth it. But
Wow. Wow.
it's a neat little sound, huh?
Yeah, really. That's incredible. Um, I have a comment here from Assad in Pakistan. He just says, "I love the way you play guitar. I got a few of your courses from True Fire. Amazing stuff. I'm from Karachi, and really proud of you." He says,
Oh, well,
"That's
thank
really
you.
sweet." I have a guy who asked a question even before this started, sent me an email, and he just repeated it here, and I'm glad he did. Rick Tackett asked, Actually, I posted a video I found of you back in the '80s playing with Sting, uh, and I guess I'd love you to give a little context for that. And he was asking about the guitar you were playing in that video, and said that to him it looked like it had a big fat neck, like larger than most guitars. And he was asking like, how common is that? Uh, is that actually the case? And do they play differently than what most people would think of a guitar feels like?
That's a great question. My very first recordings were done for the Pangea label, which was Sting's label, basically. Sorry.
No, I love watching you do this, honestly.
It's going a little sharp as we sit here. So Sting, it's old, an old subject. Everybody, oh, I was playing with Sting. He's a nice guy. I jammed with him a little bit. Executive produced my first two albums, and then I played on a few records, just a few little solo spots and guest spots on some of his records, and we did that night music show together. He very graciously agreed to play bass and support me in that, which is very nice. And he's a gentleman, great to work with. And I think at the time he really had the idea that I only played acoustic guitar, and I was like itching to get my Strat and be like, "Hey, dude, I think I should play in your band. I think you'd like it." Really, it's like he saw me as he's brown, he plays acoustic, that's what he does. And to be fair, that's sort of what I was doing at the time, more than playing electric, even though I was playing a lot of electric in recording sessions and jingles at that time. The 80s was a heyday for jingles, and I played on a ton of jingles, acoustic and electric, all kinds of stuff. So, question about that guitar. That guitar is right here.
That's great.
This guitar rarely leaves the house because it's precious. This is made by Germán Perez Barranco from Granada. It's a fantastic instrument, beautifully made, beautiful headstock, and one of a kind. The story behind this is my mom and I were sort of stranded in Spain for a while, in Granada, which is a great place to be stranded if you're stranded somewhere. And I was getting more and more interested in guitar, and so we befriended this luthier, Germán, who was kind of a sweetheart of a guy and super into spirituality and stuff like my mom, so they would just go off and talk about gurus and alien invasions and whatever they talked about, and I would sit there and play guitars, and the idea was that I would choose one eventually, and all the guitars in the shop were real nice, but there was this one hanging in the back, and I never got to play that one. And I said, "What about that one in the back?" She said, "Oh, you're not going to like that one." I said, "Well," played everything in the shop; they were all real nice. I said, "What about that one in the back?" Said, yeah, that one's all messed up. Finally, after enough pushing, he brought that guitar. And if you can look up close, you can see, I don't know if you can see because of the light, but there's no label inside it. He never put a label in it. For whatever reason, he was not proud of this work. But you see how much I've played this over the years.
Yeah.
This guitar is big. It's a 660 scale length, but it was made for somebody with much bigger hands. And there's another story that I'll get to in a second. So what Germán did is he made an extra wide nut and changed the finger and cut the fingerboard down and refretted it so that it could be 660 instead of whatever that would be, 70 something. Huge scale length. So it does have a longer neck than most standard classical guitars by quite a bit. It has a very thin profile. The fretwork was done by a fantastic luthier, crazy guy named Ed Reynolds, who did a beautiful job on the frets. And I've been messing with setting it up. You know, I'm always changing it out, the saddles and stuff to get the action right. But it's just a very clear, bright instrument. It's great for recording because while it has a classical sound, it has a lot of sustain. Very sweet sound, but also brilliant. Jazzy guitar, right? And so you have these, you know, most classical guitars can tend to be a little dark, and then when they get brighter, they tend to be a little short on sustain because they make them thinner to make them brighter, and then of course the notes don't have as much wood to resonate because they're so thin, right? This guitar has a floating. I can talk about this guitar all day, so if you guys get bored, just let me know. A floating brace in it, right? Has a floating brace in it so that the top is actually quite thick. So this guitar is at this point probably 50 some years old. And it sounds like it's new because the top is actually thick, but because this brace here is floating, not cutting it off here, it allows the top to resonate and still be relatively thick, which gives it a lot of sustain. And a lot of punch.
Did you get some like when you were in Spain? Did you learn to play some music while you were there, like around that guitar?
I hung around a lot of flamenco musicians, and I figured out pretty early that you couldn't just like be a weekend flamenco guy, you know, like you had to either like move to Spain and marry a Spanish woman and have Spanish children if you were going to play. I'm just joking around, but you know, and eat only paella if you're going to really do that thing, you know. And I was working so already at that time I was starting to, you know, I love flamenco. I mean, I actually practice it on my own here sometimes, but I'm a novice, you know, and huge respect for Paco de Lucia. Love his music, and I cried like a baby when he passed away. And so I love flamenco, and so I definitely hung out and got the vibe, and learned a little bit about some of the techniques, but I would have had to give up everything to really be a flamenco guitarist per se, and that ship had already sailed by the time I was hanging out in Spain. So this guitar, though, such a sound. Now I contacted Herman over the years and had him build me 4 more guitars. God bless him. And I sent him pictures and measurements. I said, just make more of these. And I got all kinds of amazing guitars, but they weren't this by any means. I mean, different woods, different scale lengths, different bridge design, different bracing. It's like, just like, oh, really? Okay, let's try this again. Here's the pictures, here are the measurements, here's everything about this guitar, brother. Make me just another one like this, and here's the money, just go for it, you know? And I'd get something would come in the mail, and it would just be like, open the case. You know, this is after, you know, spending money getting the guitar out of customs. This is back in the day, and I'd get the guitar, like, so turns out this guitar is really unique and one of a kind. Now, the next level of the story is I'm touring in Germany with Joe Zawinul, and I meet a dear friend, Frank Baumgarten, who's a fantastic classical guitarist and just a great friend and amazing human being. And I'm, telling him about my guitar, and he says, "Oh, I know Herman. Yeah, he built me a guitar back in the day." Now, Frank has really big hands and always has guitars made 670 scale length. So it turns out that the guitar that was in the back of the shop when I was 14 years old was Frank's guitar.
Wow.
That I bought out from under him.
Did you have it with you? Could you show it to him?
This is years and years ago. I think I did show it to him when he came to Chicago.
Wow.
But and it's just a spectacular guitar for what I do. So all of the recordings you hear, even the latest record that we have out with Goran, everything is 99% this guitar. All of my early records, it's this guitar. And I love this guitar. It's
so cool to hear you talk about it. Like, I can feel your love for it in your description of it. And I think that's one of the valuable things of talking to somebody who has steeped their entire being in music for their whole life, is you can pick up on that. And I don't know, I think there's something to learn from that, just kind of fundamentally as a musician. And I appreciate your passion for it. So, hey, I've got a question here from somebody it's kind of foundational about musicality on a guitar. He said, Dickie Paul says, "I've been playing guitar for 40 years and never learned my scales. I know, shame on me. I'm just a strummer and a singer. Can you advise a good place to start some exercises to start learning the notes on the neck during this extra free time?"
That's a great question. I don't want this to sound like a promotion, but genuinely speaking, there's a course I have which is called the Jazz Rock Workshop, and the reason I bring it up is because I think one of the problems, and I can say this without hopefully sounding like an arrogant asshole, but I think it's pretty obvious that I can play lots of different styles of music. I think that goes, I think that's fairly obvious. And one of the essential reasons that I have this flexibility is because everything that I do is physically on the guitar grounded in blues scales. And so on this course, the Jazz Rock Workshop, what I will demonstrate is, and I really believe that this is how 90% of jazz guitarists, and maybe a larger percentage of jazz musicians than is usually acknowledged, approached playing melody on their instrument. So example, if I play a blues scale, let's say an A, right? Now that's the minor blues scale. That's the Stairway to Heaven scale, right? It's right in there. In Western harmony, classical harmony, we take 7-note scales and we add in the 5 remaining notes to make 12 total. Been doing that for 500 years, give or take. But in the rest of the world, everybody starts with 5-note scales. And for some reason, we're under this misapprehension that we can't add in any notes to that 5-note scale. That's very culturalist, ethnocentric to say, take a 7-note scale, add 5. We can't take a 5-note scale and add 7? What's wrong with that? Because that's what they've been doing all over the world forever. And it seems to work. So let's say I have my minor blues scale, right? Now there's also such a thing as the major blues scale, right? Which is the same scale, just down in the relative minor, relative major. But we can actually play it right here. You probably play that a lot in bluegrass.
Yeah, that was the G run.
Now, the moment you take the minor blues scale and the major blues scale and mix them together, wow, you almost have all 12 notes. You got a ton of notes. But they're organized in a way that creates a very natural, I like to say, user interface, right? We have programs now on the computer, and most of the background stuff is the same. What we all talk about is the interface, right? The user interface of this program is very easy. User interface of that program is very challenging. It takes a long time to get up and running on Pro Tools. It takes a few minutes to get up and running on Reaper. I don't know. For example. Pentatonic scale is a very user-friendly interface, which is why it's happened naturally for thousands and thousands of years. Africa, India, South America, British Isles. It's all 5-note music. That doesn't mean 5 notes only. It means based in 5 notes, right? So if I take this and I mix them together, I get that's classic bebop. If you really analyze Grant Green, Pat Martino, John McLaughlin, McCoy Tyner, Chick Corea, Charlie Christian. It's weird, right? All the early jazz players played 5-note scales for the most part. Many of them had a formal European education. But home cooking was a 5-note oriented music in the blues world. Early jazz players, white and black, played blues scales. Texas blues, George Barnes, right? All of a sudden bebop comes along and everybody says, no, we're not going to use any 5-note scales, got to use modes and 7-note scales and all this fancy theory. And then all of a sudden you get John Coltrane and McCoy Tyner and Chick Corea and John McLaughlin and Joe Henderson and Herbie Hancock, and the list goes on and on and on, and Grant Green and Horace Silver, of people using 5-note scales again. So wait a second, there were 5-note scales in the beginning, then for about 15 years in the middle everybody said, screw 5-note scales, and then went back to 5-note scales afterwards. That doesn't make any sense. There's got to be a connection. There's got to be a thread going through it. And if you look at a Charlie Parker solo and break it down in terms of 5-note scales, a good 70 to 75% of what those musicians are playing can be broken down to 5-note scales with additional notes used to fill in. It becomes really simple. So to your gentleman asking the question, learn your 5-note scales and then start filling them in. If you check out that course, you don't have to buy it. You can get it online. If you want to buy it, great. But you can go to, what's it called?
TrueFire.
Well, YouTube has tons of clips of these courses. And you see a bunch of them and start to get started that way, right? So if you just have these scales, I mean, when I learned major scales as a young, aspiring guitar student, I went like this. Then I went, I can put these notes in between. This is what I naturally did. I can go like this. 1, 3, 1, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4. I can go 1, 3, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4. I can go 1, 3, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4. I can go 1, 3, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4. So I had these 2 fingers, forgive me, that I could, whichever one you know what I mean, whichever one I wanted, this way or this way or this one or this one, right? And I have 3 major scales and the melodic minor scale all built in there. You dig? Mm-hmm. And I did that very naturally. I didn't even think about it. And I would say that when you look at B.B. King playing, you see him doing a lot of that stuff. Doesn't sound Indian because he's not going for that sound, but it's the same material, you know?
So,
And that's all coming out of the blues scale.
so what about right hand technique? We're running out of time, and I want to respect your time, but
Okay.
what can you say about right hand stuff real quickly?
Ooh. Well, uh,
Good luck.
yeah, yeah. We need another hour for that one. There's a lot of different ways to hold the guitar pick. There's a lot of different ways to use your fingers, and each one has a sound. I really don't like it when people say, "Oh, this is the right technique, that's the wrong technique." I mean, listen to John Williams, my favorite classical guitarist in the world, who I love dearly. Listen to his album of John Williams plays three blues pieces by Charlie Byrd with classical technique. It is just disgustingly horrible. You know, oh, the worst. God bless him. You can't play blues like this. It's just it doesn't work. Now that's good classical technique, but it's not classical music. So what are you doing, right? You got to hold the pick and you got to scrape. You got to squeeze. You got to scrape. Now if I'm going to play bebop, I can't go. You know, right, and create all those accents with that same blues technique. So for that kind of playing, you need to articulate each note with your wrists. But that's for jazz playing. If I'm playing like kind of more rocky fusion stuff, I'm not going to want to articulate every note. I'm not going to want to go, you know, it's all the same. So I'm going to have to use a different technique for each of those sounds. That's what drives your technique, is the desire for sounds.
That's that's pretty amazing. Uh, so we're running out of time here. Uh, I really wanted to talk a lot about a lot of things, but I feel like I can see from the comments and stuff that everybody else got as much out of this as I did. Can you tell me real briefly before we say goodbye and I tell people how to find more of your stuff, how you're dealing with the current situation we're in here with all being stuck inside and as a performer, like and as a musician, what's going through your head and how you're dealing with this?
Uh, it's this is a sad time right now in the world. I think that's pretty obvious. There's um, a lot of choices we all have to make, and I really want to encourage people to respect people's choices because there are tough choices and there's no real right ones. You know, stimulus checks or not, we still got to feed ourselves and educate and care for our children, care for our elders. Everybody's going to have to do that in a different way. Clearly, I'm self-isolating. I haven't, left the house other than, maybe once a week so far to get a grocery run. People run the groceries out to our car, and we are very engaged in aseptic technique because my dad's a microbiologist. I was raised around that all my life, so we try to do the best we can to keep a clean household. I have a baby in the house. My little daughter is um, 7 months, almost 8, and so we have to make sure that we take care of her. I'm teaching via remote as much as I can. Not really worried so much about making money right now. In my case, I have a little bit of a wiggle room until things get more desperate. Um, and But I will say that even in my position of a pretty visibly and actively employed musician, every tour has canceled of mine. And these are substantial tours. 2 tours with Billy Cobham in Europe and the States, and in China. So actually 3. I take it back. The third one, you don't know if it's canceled yet, but it's on hold. Um, uh, I will say that there's hope at the end of the tunnel because I have a tour scheduled in China in August, and that's all full systems go. On their end, they're saying it's not really a problem over there anymore. So I don't want to compare how they dealt with it with how we dealt with it, but it seems to have worked. I have a lot of folks that I know in China that I work with, and all of them are saying the same thing. So I can't believe that the Chinese emails are that censored, saying that things are returning to normal over there. Now, of course, their economy is dependent on ours and the European economies, as African economies. So it's dependent on everybody else's economy as chiefly an exporting nation. So their economy is going to be hurt, but in terms of their social dynamic and in terms of their health, it seems, from all signs that I can tell, that things are returning to normal. And that's hopeful, because it means maybe that is in our future as well. Right now, I'm out at home, playing with my kids. We had a really important project we did yesterday. We organized all of the Legos.
This is good. This is good. These are the things that are going on now.
All of the Legos. There are no Legos that are not organized in my house.
Hey, Fareed, I want to. It's been an hour. I could talk to you for 5 hours, but I want to tell people how to reach you. Are you giving private lessons over Skype and Zoom, right?
I am.
So is the best way to reach you Fareed.com?
Fareed at Fareed.com, or just through Instant Messenger on Facebook is fine as well.
Okay.
I'm pretty connected.
Yeah, I really wanted to even talk about Garage Mahal and Math Games, some of your other projects. I know you do a bunch in the jam band scene, and I've read some great quotes from you about how much you love jam band music and all this stuff. So
Garage Mahal is tentatively back, and we're going to be doing some tours in the fall, it looks like.
Awesome. Go to Fareed.com and check all this stuff out. And even more importantly, or just as important, tune in tomorrow. I know Fareed has some really cool stuff planned for the kids. I'm dropping the Facebook event for tomorrow's kids only session in the chat right now. I know one of the other Henhouse Prowlers is dropping it in the Facebook Live. Please share it and with like invite friends that have kids at home. Get as many kids on this as we possibly can. Obviously, you can tell this guy is talented and has a way with words. I can't wait to see what he does with kids tomorrow.
We're going to have my kids joining in and tooting and hooting and hollering. So it's going to be fun.
That's awesome. We'll be uploading this episode to Patreon, patreon.com/Bluegrass Ambassadors. Check out bluegrassambassadors.org. Fareed, it has been such an honor. Some of these comments are just really sweet, of people being really moved by the stuff you shared. Yes, the kids live stream will also be on Facebook Live. Somebody asked that. So Fareed, thank you so much. I can't wait to do this tomorrow.
Everybody, please support this great cause. There are so many musicians out there who are in seriously dire straits. And we're going to start seeing, and I've already started to see some of the great musicians that live in and around the New York area being affected by this crisis. We lost Wallace Roney, the great trumpeter, recently. So let's stick together on this, and whatever you can donate, we appreciate.
Thanks, Fareed. Can't wait to see you tomorrow, 11 a.m. Central Time. Let's do this again with a little bit more music and a little bit more kid-friendly stuff. Can't wait.
That's great.
Good to see you, man.